From chart-topping rapper to condemned abuser in the blink of an eye, Soulja Boy has just been ordered to pay $4 million to his ex-girlfriend after a jury found him liable for sexual assault, battery, and intentional emotional distress. The woman, who worked as his assistant before their relationship turned romantic, testified that he regularly raped her, beat her, and sometimes locked her in a room for days without food or water. The evidence was so compelling that the jury didn't hesitate to deliver justice, and this may be just the beginning of his downfall. A $4 million verdict isn't just a number, it's a message sent rippling through the music industry. The jury's explosive decision in the case against Soulja Boy isn't simply a matter of one man being forced to pay millions. It's a moment of reckoning, where the justice system stepped into territory long dominated by blind idolization and privilege. For years, headlines have exposed the darker side of celebrity culture. But how often does accountability really follow? This case feels different, like a cultural turning point where even a global star can't hide from the consequences of his actions. Inside the courtroom, tensions were thick enough to suffocate. As the jury deliberated, the world outside waited for answers. But no one could have predicted how loud and final that gavel would fall. Jane Doe, Soulja Boy's former assistant and then partner, had just delivered some of the most harrowing testimony the jury and the public had ever heard. Tears rolled from the eyes of onlookers as she recounted years of abuse, control, and fear. With every word, the energy in the room shifted. By the time the jury returned with their decision, the weight of her story left no doubt that this was justice being served. Doe's testimony painted a chilling portrait of her life under Soulja Boy's control. She described herself as trapped, recounting frightening episodes where she was beaten over perceived slights, held against her will, and subjected to unrelenting degradation. One moment stood out above the rest, where she revealed details of an attack that occurred during a police raid. Instead of ending her suffering, Doe claimed, the chaos of law enforcement kicking down the door saw Soulja Boy turn on her in a violent fit of rage. These weren't just empty accusations backed by rhetoric. Jane Doe's team produced a mountain of evidence, including text messages reportedly sent by the rapper. One text in particular felt like a dagger in the heart of the court's onlookers. "I hope you die slow." That message wasn't just shocking, it became a focal point, emphasizing the sheer brutality of her allegations. The $4 million awarded to Jane Doe reflects more than just the jury's acknowledgement of her suffering. It's a direct rebuke of the rapper's behavior, and a strong stance against the untouchable status often afforded to stars. The breakdown of these compensatory damages shows just how heavily the jury valued Jane Doe's emotional and physical pain, her loss of professional opportunities, and the immense psychological scars she continues to carry. Her legal team didn't hold back in their reaction. "This verdict is validation," one lawyer declared to reporters outside the courtroom. "No amount of fame or money justifies ignoring human dignity." Their elation was palpable, but peppered with caution. This case, after all, is symbolic of a broader problem in the entertainment world. Meanwhile, Doe herself remained composed but resolute, telling those around her, "This isn't closure, but it's a start." Soulja Boy's reaction, however, told a completely different story. While he wasn't present for the decision, sources close to the rapper have confirmed that he remains outwardly defiant, a stance that aligns with his prolonged denial of wrongdoing throughout the case. His legal team issued a vague statement hinting at plans to appeal the verdict, calling the evidence misconstrued and promising to clear his name. This moment stood in heartbreaking contrast to the relief seen in Jane Doe's camp. But the jury wasn't finished yet. Punitive damages remained on the table. Those damages are designed to penalize and set an example, and experts speculate that Soulja Boy's deep pockets make him a likely target for a higher financial blow. So, what's the price of systemic abuse? The $4 million decision only scratches the surface. With the jury set to evaluate further consequences, the full extent of Soulja Boy's liability might not be measurable in dollars alone. Fans and critics alike are watching. The entertainment industry as a whole is watching. The question remains, will this be the precedent that finally calls celebrities to order, or just another moment swallowed by the noise of fame and money? Jane Doe's testimony wasn't just disturbing, it was gut-wrenching. Her words commanded the courtroom's attention, sparking a wave of shock and disbelief that would carry over to the public as details surfaced. In her account, she laid bare the extent of her suffering while employed as Soulja Boy's assistant, a professional relationship that spiraled into an abusive nightmare. What initially started as a promising role alongside the rapper turned into an ongoing cycle of control, violence, and psychological torment. Doe described how her life shifted once she began living and working in Soulja Boy's home, a situation that blurred the lines between personal and professional boundaries. Her testimony offered a grim window into her everyday reality, essentially a prisoner in what the outside world might mistake for a mansion of luxury. At the heart of her statements was a chilling recount of how she was routinely beaten, berated, and denied basic necessities. She recalled moments where she was locked in a room for days at a time, provided neither food nor water, leaving her physically weakened and mentally broken. What made her story even harder to stomach were the documented moments of escalation, where rage turned into physical assaults that could not be ignored. One incident, in particular, left the courtroom hanging on every word. During a police raid on Soulja Boy's home, chaos unfolded. But for Jane Doe, the terror was personal. She testified that while authorities searched the property, he attacked her in the bathroom, physically restraining and beating her in an effort to keep her compliant and silent. The details of this assault stunned the courtroom, as it painted a picture of a man willing to prioritize control over another person, despite outside intervention. The audience, both inside the courthouse and in the wider public, could not believe the audacity of his actions. This bathroom attack symbolized everything Jane Doe claimed she'd endured, a cruel mix of manipulation, violence, and disregard for her humanity. Adding credibility to these claims were screenshots of text messages that left jurors visibly shaken. These were not vague or innocuous exchanges, they were downright malicious. Among them was a text reading, "I hope you die slow," sent by Soulja Boy himself. That single sentence became a lightning rod in the trial, capturing the vengeful nature of the relationship in stark clarity. It wasn't just the content of the messages, but the pattern they established, showing how threats, intimidation, and psychological abuse were a constant presence in their interactions. The texts, combined with photographs of Jane Doe's visible injuries, created an undeniable narrative. Her story was no longer just words. It was backed up by evidence that couldn't be dismissed. As these horrifying details came forward, the ripples extended far beyond the courtroom. Fans and media alike were left reeling, trying to process how this level of violence went unchecked in such a high-profile figure's life. Social media became a battleground, with countless people asking the same haunting questions. How did this man maintain his career with these allegations behind the scenes? Why did it take so long for the truth to come out? For others, the revelations forced them to confront their own complicity in idolizing celebrities without knowing what happens beyond the spotlight. One particularly viral reaction summed up public frustration. "We keep letting fame excuse behavior that would ruin anyone else." But this wasn't just about public opinion, it was also about exposure. As more fans voiced their shock, many began reflecting on obscure moments from Soulja Boy's past, revisiting his public behaviors and comments through a new lens. Past controversies that had once been brushed aside as antics began to take on darker implications, fostering a growing sense that this case might only scratch the surface. The sheer emotional weight of the evidence inspired more survivors to speak up online, claiming their own experiences of mistreatment within the industry. For Jane Doe, the reaction served as vindication, but also a haunting reminder of just how common these situations appear to be within powerful circles. All eyes quickly turned to Soulja Boy as people demanded answers. How did the rapper respond to accusations that painted him as a serial abuser? His confidence before the verdict was unapologetic, but now, facing millions in damages, fans couldn't help but notice cracks in his public facade. Soulja Boy's denials were as loud as ever, with his legal team pushing back hard on the decision, calling it a misrepresentation of the facts. His refusal to own up to the allegations only fueled the backlash, setting the stage for a now contentious relationship between him and his audience. Public forums began debating if his career could weather such damning evidence, while supporters dug in, clinging to claims of innocence. From viral hits to viral outrage, Soulja Boy is watching his empire crumble in real time. The $4 million verdict against the rapper has hit every corner of the internet like a bombshell, leaving fans, critics, and even former collaborators questioning if his career can survive the fallout. The courtroom's judgment was shocking, but for many, what came as an even bigger surprise was the speed at which the backlash poured in. Within hours of the verdict being announced, social media was ablaze with calls to cancel Soulja Boy altogether. Hashtags like #CancelSouljaBoy and #Justice for Jane Doe began trending, drowning out any defenders still clinging to his once iconic image. And if that wasn't bad enough, even his upcoming tour, the one being marketed as proof of his relevance, suddenly became a focal point of protests and petitions. Organizers are reportedly scrambling amidst pressure to cut ties. Several rumors suggest that venues are reconsidering their partnership with Soulja Boy due to fears of bad press and protests. Already fans have said they'll boycott his shows, with one user tweeting, "Are we really gonna keep giving abusers platforms? I'll never support anyone who excuses this." And yet, the damage isn't stopping here. The verdict has also resurfaced allegations from Soulja Boy's past, with critics digging into years of questionable behavior that maybe should have set off alarms long before now. These recent developments expose the glaring contrast between Soulja Boy's larger-than-life public persona and the darker reality now in the spotlight. His reputation was built on being brash, unapologetic, and headline-worthy, leaning into the very antics that once made him a favorite of viral culture. But that public bravado doesn't hold up so well against the weight of the charges pinned to his name. Social media, once his battlefield for attention-grabbing beefs and wild claims, is now his undoing. Clips and screenshots have surfaced dissecting instances in which his treatment of women was publicly dismissive or outright offensive, with fans harshly criticizing the way his personality normalized toxic behavior. Even the broader cultural climate is stacked against him. The #MeToo movement gave survivors a platform to demand accountability, and the entertainment world has seen repeated calls to clean house. Now, artists like Soulja Boy find themselves facing deeply uncomfortable questions. Fans are not just questioning him, they're scrutinizing the people and institutions that propped him up despite a documented history of violent tendencies. "We let this slide for too long," one fan admitted in disgust, as others piled on to demand changes in an industry that shields problematic stars until it's far too late. And where is Soulja Boy in all of this? Right where you'd expect, denying every word. In response to the verdict, his legal team has doubled down, announcing plans to fight what they're calling a gross miscarriage of justice. They point to their claims of insufficient evidence and allege inconsistencies in Jane Doe's testimony, painting him as a victim of public hysteria. Soulja Boy himself has maintained radio silence on social media, an uncharacteristic move for someone with a track record of responding to controversy by lashing out. While his team argues his innocence, the victim's legal representatives see the verdict as not just a step toward closure, but a warning to others. Accountability doesn't stop with this case, Doe's lawyer said in an emotionally charged statement. This isn't just her victory. It's a victory for survivors everywhere. The public, however, is largely divided. On one side, there's collective outrage, with people calling for Soulja Boy's total erasure from the music industry. For them, the allegations and the corroborating evidence are too severe to ignore, no matter how big of a cultural moment he may have been in the past. But as always, there's a pocket of diehard supporters sticking by him, either believing his proclaimed innocence or refusing to let the allegations overshadow their nostalgic connection with his music. The age-old debate over separating the art from the artist has returned, this time under a much darker spotlight. And this split is deeply visible online, where fans argue over whether it's possible to love the music without condoning the man behind it. Despite the loud debates, one thing most agree on is the lasting stain this case will leave on his career. While the $4 million in compensatory damages is already a brutal blow, the looming punitive damages could be a financial and symbolic nail in the coffin for the rapper. Experts believe the jury could send an even stronger message with a second round of penalties designed to punish beyond just compensating the victim. The long-term damage won't just be financial, it's his reputation that's now in freefall. Will brands still work with him? Will other artists stand by his side? And at this point, can he ever rebuild the public trust he's shattered? The $4 million verdict against Soulja Boy isn't just a story about one man's actions. It's a wake-up call to an industry that has too often turned a blind eye. For years, fame has acted as a shield for celebrities, allowing horrifying behavior to go unchecked. But this case? It shows the tide is turning. As fans, we have a choice to make. Do we continue idolizing stars regardless of their actions? Or do we demand accountability, no matter how uncomfortable it gets? Punitive damages, a potential appeal, and the unraveling of a career. This story is far from over. Stay tuned.